I think, is to figure out your why.
Yeah, for sure. Why?
This is Worldschooling Q&A. I'm Astrid, creator of The Wandering Daughter. As a traveling family, we've spent 4 years traveling full-time to over 18 countries and 6 continents. Wherever we go, we try to learn as much as we can about the countries and cultures we visit. While we didn't coin the term, we like to call this worldschooling, using the world as our classroom. Each week, my husband Clint and I will answer one question about worldschooling and share our experiences of traveling the world with our kids. Ready to get started? Great! Let's dive in.
So today's question is, how do I handle the logistics of traveling full-time as a family? So this is a big topic.
Yes.
And I think we can break it up into smaller topics in future episodes. So I feel like for this one, let's keep it high level and kind of talk about, the things to consider, and then we'll dive deeper in future episodes.
Yeah, this is a good one too. I think we'll this is where we're using the if you're a Patreon subscriber using the office hours, I think we'll dive into a lot of these topics more.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So Astrid, what's the first thing I think you need to consider when, I guess, planning for a world schooling trip?
Well, in my opinion, and I think you would agree with this too, like the very first thing, even before picking where you're going to go, I think, is to figure out your why.
Yeah, for sure. Why?
Why is it important to know your why? Because that's what's gonna inform, the whole theme of your trip. It's going to affect, how you guys interact with each other, or like how you interact with the world, and also kind of set the tone and expectations.
Yes.
For every family member too.
Yeah, I think for me too, one thing I don't think I thought enough about this, because the thing I realized when I started traveling is that I knew I wanted to leave. I knew I wanted to go travel, but I don't think I really thought about the reasons why I wanted to go travel. So then for me, it's like when we left and we started traveling, there was still a little bit of like not that lack of fulfillment.
Right.
Until I was trying to recognize the things that I was trying to accomplish. So I think really spending some time with the why and understanding why are the reasons that you want to travel, or in my case, why are the reasons you want to leave where you're currently at?
Yeah.
And really tap into that.
The other piece about talking about the why is including your kids in that conversation too, because when you're this is a family decision. This is a big decision for your family. And so you want to make sure your kids are on board, and your kids also have a reason why they would want to travel. Okay, so once you figure that out, how do you think we could break this out into, like the logistics? How could we organize it in a way that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, I don't think we thought about this necessarily when we started doing the planning, but in retrospect, I think the way you could break it out is like pre-trip, during trip, and post-trip.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And we say post-trip also because I think most world scores tend to go for some amount of time. There are a few world scores out there traveling with families that are kind of indefinite, but I think for the most part, a lot of us it's a gap year, or it's 3 years, 5 years. There is going to be some time where you kind of come back to quote unquote home.
Yeah. And traveling full time doesn't even have to be like multiple years. I mean, you could even consider it like just a few months. Some of these things, these logistical things still need to happen even for like a multi-month trip. So,
yeah. So I think, Astrid, for this, let's just kind of high level go through these 3 different categories, just talk about or just briefly mention the different things. And like I said, we can go into this more in depth later. Yeah. So pre-trip, what would you say?
Well, like one of the things is like the budget. I'm like a numbers person, and I always am like, how are we going to, like, what's the budget going to be like? But I think also figuring out like, how are you going to pay for your trip?
Yeah.
But a budget won't be informed until like you pick your destinations too, right? You have an idea of like where you want to go.
Yeah.
Well.
I guess along with the why, there's one other thing I think we always recommend. And I think that's pick a date.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Because I think that's so you got the why, pick a date. So even I guess the first thing of your pre-trip planning is pick a date.
Yeah.
That commitment to that date is going to set like the type of travel you're going to do, the duration of travel, and all the stuff you need to do to build up to that. So, for example, if you're just going to go for, say, a week or two, there's not really a lot of pre-planning stuff you need to do.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go for a year, a gap year, then you need to figure out a lot more about your current situation. If you're going to be gone kind of indefinite, and when I say indefinite, 3 years plus, then there is even more that you need to consider. And those sections, I think, get bigger.
Yeah, that's true. So creating a plan. I think what was something that was helpful for us in terms of creating a plan?
I think, well, one, picking the date of when we wanted to go was super critical.
Yeah.
For us, also picking the location. But then for us, we like to project manage stuff. So I think picking a tool that we could organize our thoughts. We also know families that have just a piece of paper and they write tasks on. We chose to do project management software because we both come from kind of corporate project backgrounds. So we totally geeked out on that and wrote all our tasks and on project management software and did check-ins and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, so we did a multi-year gap year from 2018 to 2021, or sorry, 2022. And as we were planning, we started planning that at the end of 2017. And at the time we were using Trello, which is a great tool to use for any kind of like project planning. But these days we use Notion, which works kind of the same way. And you can, create, like what Clint said, like having due dates and setting out like the tasks and stuff. So you've got your plan and we've got your budget. What are some other pre-trip things to think about?
Yeah, I think if you're going to travel with your kids are young, and you are concerned, or not concerned, but like, schooling is going to be part of it.
Yeah.
That might not be the case for everyone, but if you are planning on doing some sort of schooling, you need to figure out some logistics around that. And that can be as simple as figuring out if you need textbooks, how are you going to manage that? If you have some learning challenges you need to be aware of, or that you're going to be aware of, how you're going to handle that. So just anything around learning, the approach that you want to try, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And then moving on to like physical things, your property, or your home. So if you're renting, that's pretty easy because you can just, either break your lease early or just wait until your lease is done. But if you own a home, then there's a few other things to consider. Like, are you going to sell it and use that money to travel, or are you going to put it up for rent, or are you going to do Airbnb? So think about those type of things too.
Yeah, I think along those lines is also downsizing, or at least going through your stuff. You don't necessarily have to downsize. Highly recommend it though, because when you travel, depending on how long you're going to go, so we're assuming now if you're talking about property, what you're going to do with your property, you're looking at like a gap year or longer. So then also you need to look at your stuff. Are you going to throw it in storage? In which case you're going to have those storage costs. Are you going to sell it all? That's great. But if you're planning on returning in a year or two, you're going to have to buy all that stuff again, or at least buy a chunk of it again.
Yep.
So those are all things you need to consider. But I think going through the exercise of downsizing is really helpful. It can be cathartic. It can help set the emotions for travel. Because the other thing too is when we downsized, we're like, at some point, like, we got rid of a lot of our furniture. And so we were living out of suitcases essentially. And that really set the tone of like, okay, we're really doing this.
Yeah.
What's one thing? What's just a tool we used or something, a resource we used when we were downsizing?
Well, we liked this, or I read this book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And I like it because she has like a process for, going through your things to minimize your items and really like taking every piece of article or like every piece of thing and asking yourself, does this spark joy? And we do that with the kids. I mean, this is really helpful with the kids because, you can take a toy that they have and say like, okay, do you want to keep or do you want to give away or throw away? And is this going to, and if they say keep, you ask like, well, is this going to give you the same amount of joy or like enjoyment now as like, let me back that up again. So you take a toy that they have and you ask them like, is this toy going to bring you the same amount of joy a year from now or when we come back from our trip versus now? And it kind of helps them think through like, well, okay, I think I've outgrown this, or like, no, I think I'm really going to keep it. And it just helps them to be mindful of the things that they have.
It's helpful too when you have your backpacks or you have your luggage and you're going through this exercise because that's really hard to think about unless they have that limitation of what they can actually fit in their bag and what they can't. So some flexibility around it.
So let's move on to like what we would call like the during the trip type of things. Obviously, you would want to think about these before your trip too, but this is something that you're going to constantly be thinking through as you're traveling because each location is going to be different. So what are some considerations, like logistical considerations?
I think packing, making sure you really think about your packing. Think about this before you go. We've found it's hard to think about it before you go as much. You can have your gear and what you think you're going to travel with, but honestly, every single month we traveled, we were constantly adjusting what we were packing and bringing because you're gonna be everywhere. You're gonna be traveling through bus stations, airports, walking half a mile or longer to get to a train station or something with all your gear. If your kids are younger, you're gonna be carrying their gear. So thinking about what you need and not being afraid to constantly adjust that. What else?
And what about like booking things? What is your recommendation for like lodging or flights?
Yeah, we try to, it's a balance. The longer you book in advance, the cheaper things are. But when you start traveling, you're hanging out with other families and things like that. Sometimes it's like, oh, these families are going to this destination in a couple months and you kind of want to go with them. So having some flexibility, like if you know you're going to be in a Worldschooling hub and there's other families there, be flexible. Don't book stuff in advance. But if you know that that's not necessarily the case, then go ahead and book several months in advance. That planning aspect is fun too. It keeps you going. What about while you're traveling? Like if you're working, what are some considerations?
Well, internet connectivity for sure is important if you're going to be working remotely, but even just to stay connected to friends and family back home. We always recommend, and we've talked about this in a past episode, but we always recommend having a backup plan. So like, you can't always rely on the hotel or the Airbnb Wi-Fi. So make sure that you can also, you have another device that you can hotspot off of if, the primary source of Wi-Fi is not available. What about staying connected with family and friends back home?
Yeah, I think it's important. Just be intentional about that. It's really easy for you to be swept up in the experiences you're having while your family's back home wondering where the heck in the world are you. So just be intentional about connecting with them. There's a lot of apps. We can dive deeper in that in office hours or something, but there's lots of ways to stay connected now. It's not just Skype. Now there's 1,000 different ways to stay connected. So,
and something to consider too that you may not think about are like the travel days, downtime while you're waiting at the station, or just like, how do your kids handle, or how do you handle like those travel days where maybe you have to do multiple connections just to get from one point to the other? If you have to leave early in the morning or you have to leave late at night, or there's like a long layover in XYZ place. Maybe you can either use it to rest or use it to like, visit that place. So
Yeah.
things to consider. Let's move on in the last few minutes. Let's move on to the post-trip stuff.
Yeah, post-trip, I think, is something that a lot of world explorers don't think about, but probably should. So if you know you're going to end at some point, it's worth putting some thought before the end of your trip about what that's going to be like. And I think the number one thing probably is just where are you going to end up? The cool thing about world schooling is like the world is literally your oyster. Is that how the phrase goes?
The world is your oyster.
The world is your oyster. You're
delicious.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of you're going to gain values about like, what about this location that I like? What is about this location I like?
Yeah.
And then, so just, you don't have to go back to where you're from. You can go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's another thing?
So the other thing to think about is just like giving yourself some space and time for emotional processing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be like, even if it's not a fully life-changing trip, it is definitely going to be something that is impactful, especially, given the things that you experienced during the trip. And so you want to give time to like process that and reflect, and then think about how you can, take the lessons that you learned through your travels and apply that in the future.
Yeah. And just quickly on that too, because this could be a whole episode or office hours for me. I went through a roller coaster of emotions, but the longer your trip, the deeper those emotions are going to be.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
so, and your emotions can be anything from relief and comfort for being back home and all the amenities that you get from that, or grief. I experienced a lot of grief for returning back. So they can be all over the place. And I guess that just leads me to like, before you come back and when you come back, maybe even this one might fit all three. Just reflect a lot. Reflect on what you're observing, what you're taking in, reflect how your emotions are, reflect just as much as you possibly can. Teach your kids to reflect, keep a journal, do whatever you need to keep track of these values, even down to the minutia of like, right now in this moment, I feel connected to something.
Yeah.
Like write that stuff down, because when you come back and you're processing those emotions, it's really helpful to go back and know like, oh, when I'm in this situation, I feel really connected. Maybe that's a value I need to try to seek out. Yeah. So anything else for those three sections, you think?
Well, no. And I think what Clint mentioned earlier, we'll cover these topics and several of these topics in more depth in our office hours. So, that's a perk for our Patreon subscribers. Mm-hmm. And then I also cover a lot of these topics and more in my ebook, Hey Kids, Let's Go Travel. So if you don't want to, wait that long for office hours, you can certainly buy my ebook and start like diving into like the logistics of planning a full-time travel trip with your family.
Cool. Anything else?
That's it.
Good.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Worldschooling Q&A with Astrid and Clint. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links we mentioned in the episode, and visit my website, thewanderingdaughter.com, to dive deeper into worldschooling and family travel.
If you like what you hear, please consider supporting The Wandering Daughter on Patreon. It really helps us out and keeps the show going. You'll also get exclusive perks like episode transcripts, additional resources, access to office hours with us, and more. You can find us on Spotify or the podcast app of your choice. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you can tap the bell icon to get notified when new episodes come out. And if you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps new people find our show.
If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap the bell icon to get notified of new episodes. You can follow me on Instagram @WanderDaughter or follow The Wandering Daughter on Facebook. Links to these are also in the show notes. If you have any worldschooling questions you'd like us to answer for future episodes, feel free to throw them in the comments or send us a message at thewanderingdaughter.com/podcast. Until next time, happy travels!
Bye.